Shadow, the loyal dog who turned deadly, a shocking true story. It was a quiet October morning in 2016, in the sleepy town of Lowell, Vermont, a peaceful, rural place tucked into the green folds of the Northeast Kingdom. Life moved at a slower pace. Most folks knew their neighbors. Kids rode bikes without fear. And on Miller Road, nestled between dense woods and golden farmland, lived 62-year-old Harold Klein and his dog, Shadow. Shadow was a black German shepherd, powerful, intelligent, devoted. To anyone who met him, Shadow was just that, a shadow to Harold, following him everywhere, to the mailbox, to the hardware store, even to church. But what no one expected was that Shadow had a darkness inside him no one saw coming. Harold had rescued Shadow 3 years earlier. The dog had been found abandoned in a junkyard near Albany, New York, malnourished, scarred, terrified of sudden movements. Harold, a retired high school history teacher, saw something in the dog others didn't. He brought him home, fed him by hand for weeks, and slowly, Shadow began to trust again. They were inseparable. Neighbors described their bond as soul deep. But there were signs. A mail carrier, Marla Jensen, once reported that Shadow growled aggressively when she approached the gate, unprovoked. A friend of Harold's said Shadow lunged once when she raised her arm too fast during a conversation. Harold always brushed it off. "He's protective," he'd say with a chuckle. "Wouldn't hurt a fly unless it buzzed too close." But in October 2016, something changed. The night of October 12th was unusually cold. Frost clung to the grass like sugar. That night, Harold had invited his neighbor, 34-year-old Kevin Morales, over to help with some plumbing work in the basement. Kevin had been over many times before. Shadow knew him, trusted him, or so Harold thought. According to police reports, at around 8:30 p.m., Kevin entered through the side door, called out to Harold, and Shadow met him at the kitchen. At first, calm, wagging his tail, Kevin reached down to pat him, and then, out of nowhere, Shadow lunged. The bite was vicious, straight to the neck. Kevin stumbled back, screaming. Blood spattered the kitchen tiles. Harold rushed in, shouting Shadow's name, trying to pull him off, but the dog wouldn't stop. It took a fire extinguisher to finally separate them. By the time paramedics arrived, Kevin was in critical condition. He was airlifted to Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center and died 3 days later from his injuries. The town of Lowell was in shock. The news made headlines across New England. "Beloved dog kills family friend. What went wrong?" Authorities seized Shadow under Vermont's dangerous dog law. But the investigation revealed something startling. Shadow had a history. The scars on his body weren't just from abuse, they were from previous fights. A shelter worker admitted, off the record, that Shadow had once attacked a handler. That file was lost during the transfer to Harold. Harold was devastated. In his statement to police, he said, "I didn't adopt a killer. I adopted a creature I thought needed love. I never imagined he'd take a life." Shadow was euthanized 10 days later. Harold didn't attend the appointment. He couldn't bear it. He moved out of his home shortly after, and to this day he refuses interviews. But once in a letter to a friend, he wrote, "We always say dogs are reflections of us. If that's true, what part of me did Shadow reflect?" There are many stories about loyal dogs, about pets who save lives, alert owners to danger, or die protecting their families. But Shadow's story is different. It's the kind that lingers, that unsettles, because it asks the question we rarely want to answer: can love heal everything? Or are some wounds too deep, too buried, to ever be tamed? This was the story of Shadow, the loyal companion who turned deadly. If this story moved you or made you think, consider subscribing for more true stories that reveal the unexpected, the emotional, and sometimes the chilling side of real life. Leave a comment below and tell us what you think happened that night. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to like and share. Because sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones that really happened.